Welcome back to another episode of the Lendr Podcast. I'm Bryce Matheson, and as always, this episode is brought to you by Lendr. Lendr is a loan management software tool designed to help you with every aspect of your business, from origination to servicing to payoff. Lendr helps you with document generation, helps you with collecting monthly payments, dispersing monthly payments to your investors, taking in new loan applications, giving your borrowers a portal that they can log into, giving your investors a portal that they can log into. Pretty much every aspect of everything that you do inside of your lending business can be done and facilitated through Lendr. You can check that out by going to joinlendr.com. That's Lendr, joinlendr.com. Now, onto the episode. This week I want to talk about why we ultimately decided to start Lendr, our loan origination and servicing tool, which obviously as we do this podcast, we promote it pretty heavily, but there's a very strategic reason behind why we decided to start, this software company in addition to running our own private lending company as well. So I want to go back quite a bit just to give some context as to kind of the whole picture in its entirety. My professional career is in tech. I have been in the tech space professionally for around 12 years or so. Probably about a year and a half ago now, I actually left my W-2 job. I was a IT contractor for the Department of Homeland Security. So I was doing cybersecurity, infrastructure management, servers, all that kind of stuff for quite some time, 10 to 12 years. But even before that, I have had an interest in tech and a love for tech for quite some time. Like ever since I was a child, I was always breaking things and tinkering with them and pulling them apart and putting them back together. And, I was always curious with like the innards of the computer and how it worked. So, like I said, I've had this love for tech for quite some time. So I grew up and I started really in like the software space around when I was like 15 years old or so. And when I say started, this is very limited, right? I mean, like building very basic websites for friends and family. My first big one was for a family friend who owned a beauty salon, and so I built their website. And I'm embarrassed to this day what it looked like, but they ran that website for probably 10 plus years before, updating it and changing it. So that's just kind of how it started, just this love for tech. Anyway, so I graduated high school, went to college, and it was always interesting to me because I would look around at friends or, other students or colleagues around me, and they would say, well, I'm majoring in general studies just because I don't really know what I want to do. And that was always like appalling to me because since the age of 9, I always knew that I wanted to be in tech. And so there was never this like discovery or exploratory period in my mind. I just always knew exactly what I was going to do, at least straight going into college. And so that was really beneficial for me because I didn't waste much time, exploring stupid classes or wasting credits on things that I just didn't really need to do. So, and because of that, I actually graduated college a year early just because, like I said, I was not, running around wasting time with all these stupid classes, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So when I left college, I moved to Salt Lake City and I did a couple internships there. I did one internship, didn't really pan out like I was hoping. I was hoping to get like a job out of it, but ultimately it didn't really provide me an experience that was going to be relevant. And so I actually ended up doing a second internship with a hospital there, Intermountain Healthcare. If you're living in Utah, I'm sure you're very familiar. I did an internship there with their system administration team. And so I did that for around 6 months or so. And right around that time, I was graduating. And so I was really looking for a full-time job and a full-time opportunity. And as I was doing that, I realized pretty quickly that there was not going to be a full-time position for me at Intermountain Healthcare. They said, look, this internship doesn't really have like a specific end date. Like, we'd love to keep you, but we just don't have a position for you full time. And so now that I was graduated and I had a degree, I was really looking for something that paid, frankly, more than $15 an hour. And so I was looking for like a big boy job. So I started looking around. I found a job with a small company about 4 hours north of where I was currently living in Salt Lake City, basically back where I went to college in Idaho Falls, Idaho. So I started working at this company. I worked there for about 3 years. To be frank, it was a very shitty company. It was a horribly run company. The workplace environment was incredibly toxic. And all of this is in hindsight, in retrospect, right? But at the time, the experience that I gained was invaluable. It was so much more than I had ever learned in college or even anticipated learning in my first role on the job. The reason for this was because it was such a small company, I really got my hands on a lot of different different tools and pieces and things. So like I got to touch databases, I got to touch storage arrays, I got to touch servers, desktop computers, VoIP phones, like every aspect of an IT infrastructure. Whereas most companies, you're like, okay, you are a software engineer, you are going to be doing nothing but software, and you don't really get you don't get to dabble in all these other things. So it was very beneficial for me to have this introduction to all these different aspects of the IT infrastructure. Now, at the same time, that job still paid better than my internship was paying, but it wasn't amazing. It was around $40,000 a year. I think my initial salary was like $42,000 a year. And keep in mind, this was around 2016, so prices looked very different than they do now. And even though at the time for my first job out of college, it was a good pay, but it still wasn't like screw you money. It wasn't like I could do whatever I wanted, right? Like I was making ends meet, but it still was not a ton of money. And so that's when we kind of got our first foray into real estate. We started doing rentals. I was getting married at that time. You're probably familiar with that story. But essentially what happened was I started investing in real estate with my wife. We bought a couple rentals, and then we moved into flipping, and then we moved into lending, which you're, again, probably familiar with my story. If not, I do talk about that in some earlier episodes, but I don't really want to focus on that for the scope of this episode. Anyway, so we got started in real estate, and that was mainly used as just to supplement our income. Like I said, I wasn't making a ton of money. I wanted to build a bigger, better life, and we just didn't have the funds to do that with my W-2 job. So we started investing in these rentals, and ultimately what happened was I noticed kind of a small niche in the rental industry is that basically what I was looking for was a tool to keep track of my income and my expenses. Now, obviously you're probably thinking, okay, well, no shit, just use QuickBooks. That does exactly what you're looking for. The thing is, it does, but it was very expensive and kind of a little bit bloated and convoluted for my needs. I didn't need something that was frankly that expensive. And really what I was looking for was the ability to track my expenses, but I also wanted to see the profitability of my individual units. So say I had a fourplex, I wanted to see if unit A, B, C, and D individually were profitable based on the income that they were bringing in and the expenses that were going out. Now, there is a way to do this in QuickBooks, but you have to have one of the higher tier plans, which I think was $40 or $50 at the time. And now it's even more. I think it's $60 or $70 per month. And I just felt, frankly, that was a little expensive to just be able to add these classes in QuickBooks to the individual, essentially tag the individual units and then break them out separately to be able to see the sub income and sub expenses for those individual units. The other thing was, again, my mindset back then was not necessarily the best, and I was really new in business. I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I should have just paid the money because I didn't value my time, but I was like, gee, $70, or $50 a month, that's $600 a year. That just seems like a lot to track my expenses. So having this experience in tech led me down this road of actually starting my first software company. And I started this company called Rentastic. And essentially what it was a QuickBooks spinoff. It was a small accounting software for mom and pop landlords. And really all it was is you connect your bank account, you import all of your transactions, and then you classify them individually. And you say, okay, this expense was for this unit, this expense was for this unit, this rent that we collected was for this unit. And then you apply it, and then it just obviously spits out your P&L at the end of the year, just like QuickBooks would. It would show you your profit, your loss, your net income. And then ultimately I could break down and I could see, okay, which units are profitable and which ones are dead weight. And ultimately, when you're looking at your portfolio, I think people think that they are profitable, but they don't actually break it down into individual units. So I remember, for example, looking at, and this was earlier in our career, we just had a handful of rentals. I remember looking at our portfolio as a whole, and we were cash flowing around $3,000 per month net. Now, that was great until you looked at the individual units, and I realized that we had two units that were basically dead weight. Like there was one unit that was, for whatever reason, breaking even every single month, and there was another unit that was actually a net loss every single month, and it was losing us around $300 to $400 per month. And so it's great when you look at your overall numbers and you're like, oh, this is a great business, we're profitable. But when you look at the core fundamentals, you've got some dead weight that you need to trim and trim the fat. Again, QuickBooks absolutely 100% could have done this for me, but I didn't want to spend the money. So I built out this software tool, and it became moderately successful. I worked on that for 3 to 4 years. And again, I was still investing full-time in real estate, still working a full-time job, and then building this software tool on the side. And it was not like life-changing money, but at the time it was really good. I think at our peak, we were bringing in around $7,000 a month from that software company. So very good supplemental income, not complaining about that at all. But this was the pivotal moment for me. We kind of a background on what was going on with our life at the time. This was around the time when we started to pivot away from the rentals and move more into the flipping side of things. And I started falling out of love with the software company that I had built. It was fine, but it was just kind of becoming more of a headache. It was still a relatively easy business to manage. I was doing all these other things on the side, but I just felt like my heart was leading me elsewhere, and it was becoming more distracting than it was beneficial. So what I ended up doing was I actually listed that software company for sale. And I had a good amount of interest. We had a lot of kind of window shoppers, but we did have a handful of people who were actually, decently and invested. They sent LOIs and other things. And we got into the nitty gritty financials. And like I said, people were actually fairly interested in the product. After around 3 months or so, we kind of settled on a company based out of California. They had a real estate brokerage and a couple other things, and they just felt like this product would be like a good addition to their current product offering. And so we ended up selling this company to them. I am still under NDA, so I can't say exactly the purchase price of the company, but it was mid 6 figures. It was a good exit, but it also was not life-changing money. It was not, transformational by any stretch of the imagination. It was not like, FU money or anything like that. But it was still a very nice exit. For all the work that I had put in, it was really cool. Now, the big pivotal moment for me was realizing the way that enterprise value worked. So like I said, that company was making around $7,000 per month net. When you multiply that by 12 months, you're around roughly $100,000 a year, like $90,000 give or take. Now, what I did not realize is when you have a software company that you can apply a multiple to that gross income. And it's not as easy as just looking at the gross income. You have to look at the EBITDA and net earnings and different things like that. But roughly speaking, software companies can garnish a fairly high multiple, mainly because there's not a lot of overhead. Like you build the thing once and then you can sell it many times, and your expenses typically don't increase exponentially, like if you were to sell a physical product or something where you have manufacturing costs and things like that. You build the thing once and then you can sell it for as many times as you want, and each time you sell it, you get that incremental profit. Now, typically speaking, a small brick and mortar chain, like a food restaurant or some other company with a physical brick and mortar location will still have a multiple, but that multiple is significantly smaller. It's maybe 1 to 2x your annual earnings. A marketing agency, for example, gains a multiple, but it'll be anywhere from 2 to 4x. A software company, on the other hand, depending on the financials, can be anywhere from 5 to 12 or even 20x the annual revenue if it has a strong growth trajectory and income is looking up and up, the financials are healthy, all the above. So this company was making $90,000 per year, roughly net, and I was able to sell it for mid 6 figures. That truly blew my mind when that check came in and it hit my hands, and I was like, whoa, I made this amount of money in a year, but I sold it for 5, 6, 7, 8x. I just had this transformational moment. I was like, whoa, this is how people get truly wealthy. Truly wealthy is based off the enterprise value. Everybody talks about, especially in real estate, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Cash flow is king. Yes, to a certain point. I don't know that I believe that fully anymore. There's a point in your life where you are basically either making ends meet or basically you're not living like this extravagant lifestyle, right? You cash flow is very important because it's nice because it covers your car payment and your phone bill and all those different things. But you reach a certain point where unless you are big on increasing your lifestyle, cash flow doesn't really matter anymore. Say I have expenses that are $7,000 a month, I'm bringing in $10,000 per month in cash flow. As long as I don't increase my standard of living and buy Lambos and yachts and stupid shit like this, it doesn't matter if my cash flow goes from $10 to $20 to $30 to $50,000 a month because I'm still only spending $7,000 a month. So typically what I would do is I would take that discrepancy above and beyond my $7,000. I would throw it in an account, and then I'd be like, okay, well, I don't really know what to do with this money, so I'll go and invest it elsewhere. Basically, what I'm saying is the incremental increase in income did not substantially impact our lives any longer. And so for me, the cash flow was less important than it was this big sum of money that I could put into real estate projects, put it into lending, put it into other private ventures. That large chunk of money was much more important to me than the incremental cash flow that the business was kicking off every single month. So what happened was we sold this company. It was great because I got this great check, but I didn't really think about it too much more than that. We just kind of moved on. We kept flipping houses. And then we got into another software opportunity with a buddy of mine. We started a company called the Dividend Tracker, and we've still own that company to this day. My friend that I started with has since left the company, but we're still actively working on that project and growing it. Now, I will admit my interests have kind of changed, and I am 100% invested in lending, growing this private lending company, but we also decided to start Lendr. The reason for starting Lendr is really there's two main reasons. There is a difference between recurring business, recurring revenue, and reoccurring revenue. And there is a difference. Recurring revenue is where it's basically a subscription service, Netflix, whatever, recurring revenue, where you can depend on it every single month and it just comes in and it trickles every single month regardless. Reoccurring revenue is repeat business, but not necessarily on a specified cadence. So you think of makeup for women. Most of the time, they're going to buy the same brands, the same mascara and eyeliner and foundation or whatever. I don't know that much about makeup, but they're going to buy it not necessarily on a monthly cadence, but they are going to buy it over and over and over as they run out. It's a reoccurring business. Now, I came to realize that having a private lending company is reoccurring revenue. It's not recurring revenue. It's recurring as you're collecting these monthly payments, but once that project completes and pays off, you don't have business anymore. Chances are, and we would hope that the borrowers would come back and do another loan with us, but it's not recurring revenue, it's reoccurring revenue, which is still good. It's a good model to have. The problem is that reoccurring revenue is not as dependable and it's not as predictable. And if you've talked to other private lenders, actually, I have another lender friend in the space who had this idea of rolling up all of multiple private lending companies into this big conglomerate and then selling it off to like a private equity or venture capitalist firm or whatever have you. He's since realized that probably isn't necessarily the best idea. It would be very difficult and not super feasible. And so all that to say, the complexities of doing something like that is mainly because it's difficult to sell a business like that. It's difficult to gauge the value of a company where there's not predictable monthly steady income. Obviously, you can look at trends in history and things like that, but it's just not as predictable as saying, look, this is our annual recurring revenue. We have 1,000 subscriptions on this tool and they come in every single month. Obviously, you'll have customers who will cancel and subscribe. So there is some variability, of course, but for the most part, your core customer base is not going to cancel. It's not going to be any different month after month. That is why we decided to start Lendr. Mainly because private lending, I want to grow this to be a big company. It's going to be, and it already is, a very profitable, healthy business. The problem is that it's difficult to sell. And so private lending companies make a lot of revenue, but that is the big cash flow piece that I was talking about before. It generates a lot of cash flow. It's great, but it's difficult to sell a private lending company. It's very easy to sell a software company. And when I saw the multiple that I was able to garnish from the enterprise value selling my first software company, that light switch that flipped has never flipped off. And I always want to have a company where I can increase the enterprise value and still get a very large multiple on that. So I am currently juggling two businesses, but I don't really treat it as two different businesses because they are so tightly knit and tightly ingrained. I use Lendr for our own private lending company, but it's also great because as my lending company grows and flourishes and changes and evolves, I notice that the tool needs to do that as well. Lendr also needs to be flexible, not only for my own needs, but for other lenders' needs as well, because we all do our businesses different. Right? So ultimately, that is the reason why we started Lendr. And I know that's a kind of a long, drawn out background story as to why we did it. But A, my love for tech. B, building something large, scalable, and something that can garnish a large multiple, while also like leveraging my private lending company and going hand in hand to help both of those grow simultaneously. Now, I want to just give a brief origin of like how Lendr originally started. So we started our private lending company really around 3 years ago. We didn't really take it serious until about 2.5 years ago, but we started dabbling around 3 years ago. And basically what happened was we were in between some flip projects, and we had a good chunk of cash that was sitting on the sidelines not being used. So I had a friend of mine who came to me and he's like, hey, I've got this flip that I'm wanting to do. Would you be interested in funding it? And I was like, okay. I mean, I didn't have any like immediate projects on the horizon. So I was like, I might as well earn some interest in the meantime. So we did that. We funded his project. It worked out great. There was no issues. I probably didn't charge enough, but anyway, it worked out just fine. After about 3 or 4 months, I think I got a check for $6,000, and it was great. It was literally mailbox money. It was like true passive income, and it was loved. That was when I really realized the power of like private lending and true passive income. I was like, ooh, this is fucking awesome. So that's when we started to kind of dabble in private lending. We started to get more into doing this more frequently. And then we started to do like 2 loans at a time, 3, 4, 5 at a time. And I started to notice this trend that I was spending a lot of time generating loan docs. I had my loan doc package that I had an attorney draft up. But what I would do is every time I had a new loan, I would take that package and I would go into Word and I would manually like take the previous values that I had put for the previous loan, like the LLC, the borrower name, the loan amount, all these things. I would go in and copy and paste and put all these values in here. And then what I would do is I would save the document, send it off to title. But title would often come back to me and say, hey, you forgot this, or this is wrong, or like, why are these 2 LLCs in here? Because they don't match. And what had happened was I forgot to replace one, but I didn't replace the other. And I was just like, oh man, what a pain in the ass. And so I would spend at least 45 minutes like perusing through these documents, making sure that they were perfect, and then come to find out that they weren't perfect and I had messed something up and it didn't make sense. So I thought to myself, okay, having this software background, surely there's got to be a better way to do this. So what I did was I built this quick, stupid little tool. Essentially, it was a mail merge in Word. I would take my loan application, which was just a simple form, had my borrower's name, loan amount, all the different things. I would click a button and it would take those values and go and replace them in the document, go and put it in. And then I noticed that as I sent this off to title, they didn't come back and say, oh, you have mistakes or errors. And I was like, oh, cool, this is great. And so now not only did it not take me an hour to do this any longer, but it was more accurate and I could click a button and have it be done in 5 seconds. As I was using this tool, I actually had a buddy of mine who was a private lender as well. And he was like, oh, this is really cool. Do you mind if I use this? And I said, oh yeah, of course. So I sent it to him and he used it and it was great. What kind of happened was he came back to me and was like, okay, this is really great, but can it do this, this, and this? And I said, well, I mean, not right now, but I can build that. And so I would make some changes and give it back to him. He's like, oh, this is great. And then he'd use it for a week or two and he'd be like, okay, well, what about this? Can you do this, this, and this? And then like, can it actually like generate a payoff statement for me? I was like, well, not right now, but it could. Anyway, I think you can see this back and forth. And eventually it kind of just ballooned into this full software suite tool thing that we have now, which is really great and really full feature-fledged because we've now spent the last few years building out Lendr to be a one-stop shop from start to finish all the way through to handle everything from origination to servicing to payoff. It tracks all of the charges, the payments. It collects the payments via ACH. It does the document generation. You click a button, it spits out your loan docs, and you send it to title. Like it truly is a one-stop shop for everything. So that is a really long drawn out story around like my origin, my love for tech, starting into real estate, moving into lending, and now building out this software tool. So as a recap, Lendr is really the thing that we're going to be focusing on for the next 10, 15, 20 years because I don't see myself pivoting away from private lending. I love private lending, but I also love the software side and I didn't want to abandon that. So not only does it help us with our own private lending company, it helps other people with our private lending company. And selfishly, I would love to sell this 10, 15 years down the road and have a big software exit with a 5 to 10x multiple on the software company that we built. So it's serving our needs now, it's serving the needs of other people, but also selfishly, it's combining my love and my want for recurring revenue businesses and reoccurring revenue businesses and meshing them together. Now, all that to say, I would love to have you on the platform. I really do. Obviously, I'm biased, of course, but I do think that Lendr is a really good platform for pretty much every private lender out there. Like, unless you're doing something super crazy outside of the box, I'm highly confident that it can work for what you're looking for. So that's it for this week's episode. As always, please check out Lendr. You can do that by going to joinlendr.com. That's LENDR, joinlendr.com. And I'll catch you next week.